Well, hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Hope you guys have had a good weekend so far. Of course, this is I'm recording this on a Sunday just before I get to go to work, and I thought I would look at something kind of interesting. I saw something on ESPN. They did a thing on First Take about sports best dynasties, which they had some good ones on there, but there's a couple I think that they were missing. I mean, granted, they only did five. They only did a top five, but I think there's some that they definitely were missing. But before I get into that, if you are new to the channel and you love hockey content, whether it's content like this, what I'm going to be talking about, jersey unboxings, jersey talk, any kind of hockey talk. If you love that kind of stuff, it would be greatly appreciated if you were to hit the subscribe button down there. And yeah, that would be awesome, and I would love to have you all along for the ride. So, ESPN First Take, ESPN number one, even though they now have the NHL back on ESPN, they still don't talk about it on their sports shows. I mean, especially like early, like shows like ESPN First Take. They don't talk about it. They don't have any hockey analysts on there. They don't have anybody. They have nobody on there that knows anything about hockey. None. And they even go and say, when they bring up hockey, they all roll their eyes. And they did a thing where they were talking about, like sports best dynasties. So they were talking about some of sports' greatest dynasties, and they had some good ones on there. They had football teams, they had basketball teams, and baseball teams. Obviously, you've got, especially, in basketball, you have, the Celtics, the Lakers, the Bulls, all that. Football, you've got the Steelers, you've got the Patriots, even like the old school Packers and stuff like that. And of course, baseball, you had the Yankees. But they didn't, they talked they put one particular hockey team in there, and the particular years, and even I don't think that was the best one. But they all roll their eyes the minute that Chris Mad Dog Russo did this top five, and the years that he put for Montreal, they all roll their eyes. Because they said, we don't know anything about hockey. Why do you have hockey in here? You got to try to include the four major sports. So what I wanted to talk about was, and I'll move this up just to make sure that this can be seen here, is I wanted to show some of the best dynasties that the NHL has had. And honestly, the one that they picked for the dynasty on First Take I believe he picked the 76 to 79 Montreal Canadiens. Good run, really good run, but I don't think that was necessarily the best one. Now, I wanted to go through these. These are all dynasties that I think could have been included. Now, I could have gone all the way back to the 1920s or even the 1910s and included these guys. But I didn't want to go that far back. I thought that might be a little too far back. So I went with this. And I think we've got some good ones here. So we start out here. We have the Detroit Red Wings. They won the Stanley Cup in 1950, 1952, 1954, and 1955. That is 4 Stanley Cups in the span of 6 years. I'd call that a dynasty. I would call that a dynasty, 4 and 6. It's a pretty good run. Now, I mean, do they surpass the 76 to 79 Canadians? Probably not. But that's a dynasty worth recognizing, I think. I mean, 4 in 6 years, it's pretty darn good. But now we move to Montreal. Now here, of course, here's where the majority of the dynasties are. Now, honestly, if you're talking about Montreal Canadian dynasties, he brought up, I think, the 76 to 79 Canadians. To me, that's not their best. Their best is right here. The Canadians, from 1956 to 1960, they are the only team in NHL history, in Stanley Cup history, to win the Stanley Cup 5 years in a row. 5 straight Stanley Cups. From 1956 to 1960. You'll never see that happen again. And, I mean, even the one after that, you probably won't really see again. I mean, you had some of these other teams. I mean, people talk about Tampa. Is Tampa a dynasty because they won back-to-back Stanley Cups, and but they'd been to 3 straight finals. They're not a dynasty yet. At least not to me. Not to me. They're not there yet. They could potentially be on this board if they were to win it again this year. Tampa wins the Stanley Cup again this year. That's 3 and 4 years. They would then go on this board. But even the Canadians, after 1960, they win 5 straight from 56 to 60. They then turn around and they win 4 more in 5 years, from 1956 or 1965 to 1969. The only one they didn't win was 1967. That was won by Toronto. So here the Canadians win 4 and 5. But then we go into the 70s, and here's where they win another 4 straight, 76 to 79, which I believe was included in that top 5 sports dynasties. Now, as good as that team was, I mean, the Hall of Famers that they had on these teams, I mean, you're talking Jacques Lemaire, you're talking Larry Robinson, you're talking Ken Dryden. I mean, you are seeing some absolutely incredible players. I mean, the Hall of Famers that these guys had on these teams. I mean, Yvon Cornwallis, Ken Dryden, Larry Robinson, Jacques Lemaire, Jacques Plante, I believe, was on some of these teams. Oh my goodness, I'm literally brain farting some of these, but I mean many Hall of Fame players. I think. Oh God, I'm literally brain farting some of these. Let me know in the comment section if you guys can think of some of the other ones that I hadn't mentioned there from Montreal that I'm forgetting, that I'm completely brain farting on right now. But I mean, over the span, I mean, you're talking from 56 to 79, the Montreal Canadiens won 13 Stanley Cups. 13 Stanley Cups from 1956 to 1979. So I mean, that's damn good. I mean, that's a hell of a run. But then after Montreal's dynasty here from 76 to 79 ends, we go into another dynasty. The dynasty of the New York Islanders. Their dynasty, of course, they won 4 straight Stanley Cups from 1980 to 1983. And if not for running into the team that is right below them ending their dynasty, the New York Islanders could have become the second team to win 5 straight. Because, I mean, and you talk about Hall of Famers here. I mean, you got, Mike Bossy, Billy Smith, Brian Trottier, Dennis Potvin. That's just to name a couple. I mean, the Hall of Famers here for the Islanders were just, unbelievable. But then, of course, we get to the team here that ended the Islanders dynasty, and they went into their own. Now, mind you, 1983, the New York Islanders beat the Edmonton Oilers in what was the Oilers' first Stanley Cup final appearance. That won the Islanders their 4th straight Stanley Cup. The very next year, 1984, they play again. This is where the Islanders dynasty ends, and their quest for 5 straight comes to an end. And they have not, needless to say, they have not won since then. They haven't even been back to the finals since then. So let's go to the next one. Really, if you think about it, the last real big dynasty that there was, the Edmonton Oilers. 1984, 1985, their quest for 3 in a row was ended in 1986 when the Calgary Flames won, or when the Montreal Canadiens won the Stanley Cup there. Then the Oilers come back. They win the Cup again in 1987 and 1988. 1989 is won by the Calgary Flames. And then they come back and they win it again for the last time in 1990. 5 Stanley Cups in the span of 7 years. And this one, the one in 1990, that's the one they did without Wayne Gretzky. So it shows you how good of a team they still were in 1990. Let's look at some of the Hall of Famers that this team had. Wayne Gretzky, Mark Messier, Glenn Anderson, Grant Fuhr, Kevin Lowe, I know darn well there's more. I know there's more there. Again, let me know in the comment section if you guys can, if there's other names that come to your guys' mind. But those are some of the big ones that the Oilers had. And to me, that was really the last great dynasty. Now again, we could still see a dynasty get added to this board if they win it again, if they were to win the Stanley Cup again this year. And of course, that could be the Tampa Bay Lightning. If the Tampa Bay Lightning go to the Stanley Cup final, if they win the Stanley Cup again this year, that will be 3 in 4 years, and it will have been their 4th straight Stanley Cup final. They would then be on this board. But I had some other honorable mentions here. We got the Detroit Red Wings of the 1990s, 1997, 1998, and 2002. That's 3 Stanley Cups in 6 years for the Detroit Red Wings of the 90s. The Chicago Blackhawks, also 3 cups in 6 years. 2010, 2013, and 2015. Could they be considered a dynasty? I don't think they're on the same level as these guys. But, 3 in 6 years is still a pretty darn good run. And then, of course, this might, some people might consider this like a small dynasty. I don't know if it's necessarily a dynasty because it wasn't really sustained. But the LA Kings in 2012 and 2014. Between that run from 2010 to 2015, the Cup was owned by 2 teams. It was owned by Chicago and Los Angeles. The 2 years that Chicago didn't win, 2 of the 3 years that Chicago didn't win was won by Los Angeles. 2011 was won by Boston. So those are kind of honorable mentions in the dynasty conversation. But when I look at the list that that Chris Mad Dog Russo did on ESPN on First Take of the top dynasties in sports. The Canadians one that he had, I think, yes, good, definitely a dynasty. But when you're talking about the top, the best dynasties in hockey, I don't think that's the best one. Now, we all have our own thoughts of what could be the best dynasty out of all of this. And of course, how can you really go against a team that wins 5 straight Stanley Cups? That's hard to go against. Now, mind you, I was born right here. I was born in the heart of this last Montreal Canadiens dynasty right here in 1977. That's the year I was born. So I grew up watching these two dynasties, the Islanders and the Oilers. So for me, for the time that I've been alive, I honestly would think the best dynasty is the Edmonton Oilers. Now, granted, the Oilers didn't win 5 in a row. The Canadians did. But there's a lot of other, you have Detroit in the 50s that won 4 and 6. You had, of course, Montreal win 5 straight there. In the 60s, in the 60s they won 4 in 5 years. And then in the 70s they won another 4 straight. But then in the 80s, the Islanders won 4 straight. And then after that, it's the Oilers who win 5 and 7. So, honestly, of all the dynasties that I think that he probably should have put on the board, should have been this one. The Edmonton Oilers. That dynasty, I think, is a little better than the 1970s Montreal Canadiens. Now, of course, that's just me. I'd love to know what you guys think. Of all of these dynasties here, what ones do you think is the best? Like I said, I could have gone all the way back to the 1910s and 20s and included the Ottawa Senators. But that's I think before a lot of any of our times. Doesn't mean they still weren't dynasties, but none of us were alive at that time. But I'd love to know what you guys think. Of that list that Chris Mad Dog Russo put on there for the hockey team, do you think the 1970s Canadians was the best one, or do you think it should have been one of these other ones? Like I said, for me, it would have been the Oilers. But we've all got our own picks. But I'd love to know what you guys think. Which dynasty do you think is the best one, and which one of these dynasties could he have put on the board other than the 1970s Canadians? I'd love to know what you guys think. And then, of course, what do you guys think of the honorable mentions down here? Could Detroit in the late 90s and early 2000s, could that be considered a dynasty? That's three cups in 6 years. Montreal, Chicago, of course, in the 2010s. They won 3 in 6 years. And then, the LA Kings, they won 2 and 3. But that was it. They didn't win 3 and 4. If they'd have won a third one during that stretch of time, they would be on this board too. And of course, like we said, the Tampa Bay Lightning, to me, they're not a dynasty yet. Could they get there and get put on this board? Yes, they could. We'll find that out come probably middle of April when the Stanley Cup playoffs roll around. But let me know what you guys think. Do you guys think one of these other dynasties could have rather been included on that board? And which one do you guys think is the best? I think it could be very interesting to see what everybody picks. So like I said, on that board, I would have had the Oilers. To me, the Oilers of all of these is the number one dynasty. But I'd love to know what you guys think. Obviously, I'll put the link to the Discord in the description. And again, let me know what you guys think. Which one would you include? Would you have included on the top in the top 5 sports dynasty list? And yeah, so let me know what you guys think. Hit like and subscribe if you have not done so already. And I will see you guys again later.